our next speaker is the wonderful Morna Haist, and she's based in Canada, although she is from New Zealand. And I've known Morna for about 15, 16 years, I think. And she's the most incredible woman. And she's developing leaders right around the world. So welcome today, Morna.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm so honoured and excited to be here. And yes, I am beaming in from Canada and the beautiful West Coast. So hi, everyone.
The wonders of Zoom, isn't it?
Right.
Being able to bring people from right around the world into this. So today, Morna, you're going to be talking about what it means to be revolutionary. And that's what we're so needing in the world at the moment. But before we get into that, I'm wondering, can you tell me what you think are the challenges in the current education system?
Gosh, okay. Did you want me to take up the whole 45 minutes or, oh my goodness.
Just a couple.
Just a couple. Okay, I'm going to say this through a couple of different lenses. One as the mother of teens, and one as through the lens of just working with educators. I think the number one challenge is that our global education system is no longer fit for purpose. I don't believe that it's creating and creating the kinds of leaders that we need in the 21st century, the kinds of people, the kinds of humans we need. I don't believe that our young people are leaving our education systems fit for purpose for this century. And I think one of the other big challenges is that is really the content of the education itself. And I would love to see more opportunities for our young people to be in circle with each other, to know each other, to understand themselves, to ask more questions and be an inquiry with the world, rather than being presented with answers in our education system. That's two things.
Yeah. Fantastic answer. And it's a great place to start. And it's really neat to be able to hear those answers from you. So thank you. The second question that I've got for you is, knowing what you know now, what do you wish you'd learned at school?
Oh my goodness. Well, I can say this out loud because my teenagers both know that I didn't have the best relationship with school. And I wish I'd learned in school that I was a worthwhile human being, that what I cared about was worthwhile, that my ideas were worthwhile, my opinions were worthwhile, and that I had a place in the world. And I didn't leave school with any of those things. So that would have been my wish for myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're not the only one with that same wish. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that with everybody. And that leads us into talking about today's topic, which is, what does it mean to be revolutionary? So that's my first question. What does it mean to be revolutionary?
What does it mean to be revolutionary? Well, I started using this word revolutionary really probably 3 or 4 years ago now to describe the kind of leadership and the kind of way of being that I know is needed on the planet now. And if we look at the definition of revolutionary, there are lots of different definitions of it, but the one that I use is that a revolutionary is a fearless advocate and creator of radical positive change. A fearless advocate and creator of radical positive change. And we need a bit of that on the planet right now. But why I use the word being in front of the word revolutionary is that it's often not this big external thing in the world, although it shows up in how we interact with people, what we choose to do in the world. It's really about who we're being. It's about knowing who we are. And it's about actually creating the future right now inside of ourselves. You know, if we want to create a world that works, we need to know what that feels like for us internally. And we need to create a space for this inside of ourselves. So really being revolutionary is about how we show up. And it's about what we care about. It's about knowing what we care about. And if more people on the planet were walking into situations with that intimate relationship with themselves, what they care about, what's important to them, rather than walking into life with so much noise, and I've got a little diagram to maybe explain that as we go into this, the world would be a different place. And for me, the revolution is what's happening in little moments. Yes, it can be this big thing, like I said at the beginning, but actually being revolutionary happens, when you get up and begin talking to your family in the morning. When you walk into the classroom each day and greet your students, if you're a young person, and the way you talk to other people in your life, and what you think about and how you act. And I could actually spend the next 45 minutes just going on and on about this, Kathy. So I'm curious as to what that's bringing up for you, and what else would be useful in terms of explaining this idea of being revolutionary.
It's a really good question. So much of what you're saying is resonating with other people and what other people have been talking about, because it's this idea of knowing who you are. Yeah, knowing who you are and being okay with that, and actually being more than okay with that, accepting that, and knowing more about what you care about, as you say, what your skills are, and knowing that you are enough. I don't know how many times I've heard the words, "you are enough," as we've been preparing for this. And that's something that I see is both in young people and in teachers and face it, in adults right across the world, and people right across the world. This idea that they have to be something other than who they are, that they're not good enough yet.
Oh, Kathy, you're nailing it with that. And I would take it just a little bit further and say we're more than good enough. And if we're going to be effective in leading the kind of change that we need to lead on the planet at this time, whether that's in our families or our communities and our school systems and whatever we're working on, then we need to understand that every single one of us is needed right now. We're in an all hands on deck moment for the human race, right? And we're being shown over and over again that many of our leaders are just simply not up to the challenges that we're facing. And if I was to impart just one, I guess, revolutionary idea with everyone that's watching today, it's that you are vital. You're absolutely needed. No single person on the planet right now has the answers, not one of us, but collectively, together, we can find those answers, and we find them when we come from what's most important. And I've got this little visual that I think I'll bring in now that kind of illustrates a little bit of this right now. I think that our world is so noisy, and last year, 2020, one of the noisiest to date. And when we don't know who we are or don't have that connection to who we are, and what I'll also say about that is that's not a one-time deal. Who we are is constantly being shaped and reshaped, right? We have big purpose, but every day it's being shaped and reshaped. So we need that relationship to ourselves so that we can honor that growth over time. But what happens in our world is so noisy, and often it can feel like this. Here's what we care about, and it's kind of bouncing around in the noise. We might not even be able to see it ourselves because it can get so easily drowned out, and we can also get fixated and distracted by the messages we're receiving from the media, from all over the place, right? But when we have that connection to who we really are, what we care about and what's important to us, it helps us create what I call a boundary of conscious intention, which is really about our purpose. And that little map starts to look more like this, where what we care about has a significant home. And yes, the noise enters it because we still need a relationship to the world, but not at the expense of ourselves. And when we're in more of this space, and when we're encountering other people from this space, that's when there's just an amazing potential and possibility to create something different.
And that's the stuff that I think, and I'm hearing, is not part of the education system, if you like. I had somebody talking about the first 10 years being almost like babysitting, and then and this was from a 19-year-old, the first 10 years being like babysitting, and the next 3 years being like content. Just, this is what you need to know in order to get your exams, and coming out of school and going, who am I? How do I do anything, right? And
Oh, oh,
what you're talking about is for every single person here is being able to go, this is what I care about, and it matters. And these are other people that I can do this stuff with. And together we can make it happen. It is important.
absolutely, Kathy. And I think what you're saying is so important. I want to underscore it a little bit because I think we need a both and. If I think about content, say for example, if we thought about our brains as a laptop, and the brain is the hardware maybe, and then the software is the content piece. Often we're just shoving more content, more and more content, but we're not upgrading the operating system that software goes onto. So for me, when I was a young person and looking at my young people here, and also in my role as a teacher, and most of my teaching is with adults outside of the formal education system, I aim to work with people in relationship to this, in relationship to what we care about, and then what we're learning has meaning to it. It's real. And I totally agree with that comment about babysitting. And so that's certainly the perspective that I've had as a parent on many of the experiences that my children have had, and disappointment that they're not learning more about themselves, and also learning about each other, learning how to be in relationship with other human beings and how to co-create with each other rather than dominating each other.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So that leads really well into this next question, which is, why do we need this kind of leadership that you're talking about, where you've got people being able to focus in on what they're focusing on, what they're wanting to focus on, and then the learning is about what they're needing in order to make that grow, isn't it? So why do we need this kind of leadership where we're showing up each day in our passions, in our purpose, in the things that we're interested about alongside others? Why do we need it?
Well, it's vital now. In fact, it's critical. And the reason we need this kind of leadership now is, firstly, and I think it was Einstein who famously said this, or maybe everyone's just kind of borrowed and rearranged these quotes over time, who knows, but that we actually can't create change from the same ways of being and doing that created the systems that we're dealing with. And unfortunately, I think our dominant education systems are geared towards there being an answer to questions, right? Geared towards solving more simple problems. And there's a piece of work, actually, and I brought this over for anyone who's read this book. If you haven't, grab a copy, especially for young folks. It's an amazing book. The kind of command and control leadership that's been dominant across, most of time, really, isn't fit for purpose with the kinds of challenges we're facing. There really are no simple solutions to the scale of problems we're facing. So we have to work together. We have to go on more learning journeys together where we bring in all kinds of different points of views, ideas, and that those people and ideas actually come up with solutions that we can't even imagine right now. And that takes the ability to have critical discussions with each other, to disagree, to bring in points of view that we may not actually be inclined to sit with, to invite way, way more people into the table, and in fact, to actually co-create a new table together. So they're more adaptive challenges that we're facing. They need us to be able to sit with discomfort. They need us to be able to have a relationship to ourselves so that we can know what's true for us, and what's true for others. And it's now essential. I often talk about us being alive at a critical time. And that can come across as a bit of a kind of a panicky thing, because we are in a time where I believe over the next couple of decades, like pretty much every system on the planet is going to need to change to be fit to face this century. Why we need this kind of leadership now is because we're in this time of enormous possibility. I know over the course of 2020, there's been so much talk of returning to normal, of fear, of anxiety around these systems that we've come to somewhat have a love-hate relationship with. Even if they're not working, they're there, right? The idea that things might need to change on a big scale can be really daunting. But what I want people to understand is that this way of being, once we actually tune into what we really care about and act from that place, almost everything and anything becomes possible. And I want people who are watching this to know that, yes, we're alive in a critical time, but you're alive at one of the most incredible times of possibility for us. And if you're able to tune into and act on what's most important to you, you're going to make a massive contribution at this critical time. So,
yeah, I think you're picking up on a key thing here, because there are so many possibilities at the moment. And alongside that, there is so much pain. And I'm seeing so many people almost being engulfed in pain.
yes.
Right? And so this is why it's so important to awaken that inner revolutionary, if you like, so that we can give power, if you like, to that pain, to show them that there is a way out, that they don't have to be defined by their pain, that they can move through that and actually find the things that they care about, that give them meaning, that are outside what they're being taught within the current education system. And that's why it's important to be able to have these conversations, isn't it? Because we are co-creating what is actually needed. I've seen so many people tweaking, and with the best possible intent, tweaking and trying to change things, but it's not changing the whole system. So you see people changing the content of exams or that. But this is a totally different way. This is looking at the content of what we're actually wanting to teach and wanting our students to know, isn't it? This is no longer stuff. This is about who they are and how they can bring their best selves into the world.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And, I just want to speak to pain for a moment, because, we all have some level of a relationship to pain. We're human beings, having a human experience, and that's not always rosy. And in fact, there can be incredibly challenging times like the ones that we've been collectively going through in 2020. And I don't want to say this in a negative way, but that's only going to continue. We've got other major things coming for us as a human species. And I want to say to those of you who are in pain right now and experiencing pain, it's okay. In fact, it can be an amazing, transformative experience. We actually need to learn how to sit with our pain as human beings, explore it, sit with our discomfort, learn from it. Instead of what we're kind of almost trained to do as a species, which is numb it, distract ourselves, get engulfed in the noise of the world, look for answers elsewhere, or feel that somehow we don't have the ability to live with that pain or to transform it. And we do. Pain and difficult experiences can be one of the most transformative times for the human species. So it can also, though, be a pit that we get lost in. And, for anyone who's watching this that has kind of given up hope or doesn't have that hope, I want you to know that it's just around the corner. It's just waiting for you. It might be when you wake up tomorrow. It might be in the next second. And when you kind of get quiet and tune in, you will even if you get a tiny glimpse of what you care about, that can be enough to start reigniting. And it doesn't have to be this huge thing. So again, just coming back to what you were saying, the idea of being revolutionary, if we were treating each other as whole human beings in our classrooms, in our work environment, in our staff rooms, in our, wherever we're going about our work of receiving education or educating, rather than the transactional nature of these environments that we've created, even just thinking about the educator at the front, the students sitting in a row, that's old school to me. Like, co-creations happens when we get into circles and when we discover who we are. And And I'm super excited to see what an education system that's actually based on a whole human experience could look like. It'd be amazing.
Because there's not only that understanding about yourself, is there, but there's also that understanding of who are these other people around and their different ways of being, doing, and knowing, you know, because and when we start to appreciate those differences and accept those differences, because that's one of the things that I'm seeing in so many people is the fear of judgment, you know, the fear of being judged themselves, right? And yet it's so easy to judge the other people that we have around us. And so this is what it's meaning to be human and to be able to solve these problems in the future. The more that we learn about ourselves as people and other people as people and what they care about, then we can focus more and more on that picture that you had of the circle in the middle with the noise around, and that circle in the middle getting bigger and bigger as more and more people are making that.
Absolutely, Kathy. And I think I didn't draw this picture, but I could also draw a circle with lots of other circles engaging with that circle and that overlap between us. And, you know, imagine if we were able to be in a world where each person can remain intact and invite in the person next to them and the person next to them. And there's always a place where we overlap. And if we had education systems that actually helped us get above or meta to some of these things so that we can actually have experiences of having reflected back to us, just even noticing that people think differently in the room and that's okay. People feel differently, you know, pointing out to others. And I think it's always been one of the big revelations for me on my kind of personal development journey, which I got zero of in school, but actually none. Maybe health class was the closest, but it really wasn't at all. You know, when we're able to even have guidance around learning how to talk to each other, learning how to disagree, learning how to harness those disagreements, learning how to truly co-create. You know, if we were able to create systems that actually truly valued difference, so much of our problems would actually instantly be solved. Because when I really talk about the idea of being revolutionary, it's an inner job. It's an inside job.
So that brings us really nicely into the third question that you've got for me, which is, what's one simple action that we can take to connect to? Because, you know, we're talking about all of this stuff and we need to be able to bring it down to the ground, if you like, down to earth, down to who we are. What's one simple action that we can take to connect to that inner revolutionary and then to be fueled by that?
Well, I'm going to offer something that's seemingly going to be like maybe ridiculously simple. But if you're watching this and listening, please don't underestimate the simplicity of what I'm going to ask you to do. So one simple thing is to just ask and answer the question, what is important to me? What do I care about? What is important to me? What do I care about? And create a space to answer that question. Now, that could be a piece of paper. It could be an intentional space that you create. And then once you've got some insight into the answer to that question, what's important to me, then I would invite people to bring consciousness to that. And what I mean by that, and I'll give a concrete example, and also just point out that the answer to that question, and there's 4 other key questions actually that we can answer, and I'm going to record those in a little process for folks that people can download alongside this so that you can do the whole thing. The answers to these questions sit in here, and then they become our purpose. They become what's important to us. So, for example, when I answer that question, what's important to me, one of the answers to that is what's important to me is my relationships. And what's important to me is being in relationship with other people. And so by asking this question, I often ask these questions before I go into a meeting. What's important to me about this meeting? What's important to me about these people? I've brought conscious awareness into how that's going to show up in the space. I do it before I knock on the bedroom door of my teenagers in the morning. And it gives me that little moment of pause to bring consciousness to how I want to interact with them in the next minute. What I'm going to pay attention to. Am I going to pay attention to the things on the floor that bug me? Or am I going to see this beautiful human being and have an amazing interaction with them that's going to set them and me up for success? So it's as simple as that. It's as simple as asking these questions, these really simple but yet profound questions, and actually bringing them into our conscious awareness and into our action in this moment, in this moment, in this moment. And when we start to do that, it's amazing the kind of transformation that can start happening. And also it's amazing what we start paying attention to and what we just start tuning out, because we realize that actually so many of these things that we've been fixated on, they're not even important to us.
Yeah. Wow.
Mm.
Incredibly simple, and yet, as you say, profound. Yep. And that becomes our reason for being, doesn't it?
Can I just say one more thing actually about that question? What I love about these questions, I call them the 5 essential questions. What I love about them is that they're scalable. So you can think about these questions, what's important to me in terms of the very next moment I'm in, but you can also think about them in terms of your entire life, or your business, or your school, or your classroom. They're scalable. They can go up and down. And if you're a teacher watching this, and you have the privilege of having some amazing young people in your rooms and your spaces, oh my goodness, I would encourage you to ask and know the answer to this question. Know what's important to the people that you're spending your days with, and know what's important to yourself. Ask it in the staff room. Ask it to each other. Imagine if we had conversations that were about what is actually important to us, and not about these noises and distractions and social media and the news and blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Alongside that as well, there's another question, and that is, what does success look like?
Yes.
Because that's something else. Our education system, if you like, is geared towards success is passing exams, success is doing well, and so on. But people have different ideas of what success is. And success can be, having a happy family and being your best self in that space. Yes. There are so many things it can be.
Oh, Kathy, I think this is such an important question. I want to underscore it. The way I often approach this question is just asking, what do we want to pay attention to and measure, in terms of what we mean by success? And again, I'll just relate this back to my own children. What I want to measure is people's happiness, my family's self-worth. Do they feel good? Do they feel like they're able to make a difference in the world? Do they have a connection to themselves? It's not whether they got an A on a test. It is not. And I always, when I used to get school reports when my children were younger, I was always way more interested in any information on who my child is. What are their relationships like? Are they happy? Are they engaged? Are they curious? Not whether they got, 3 out of 10 on a math test. And I think we're measuring incorrectly in our school system.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. You've brought up happiness twice in your speaking here, and we have another speaker who's actually speaking on the science of happiness.
Awesome.
And how to actually create that awareness of how to make yourself happy. And we're not talking about pasting a smile on your face there. We're talking about what is that deep core contentment. What is the stuff in your life that gives you a deep core contentment that you can then draw on to be revolutionary in the world, because that's actually what we need as well.
Oh, it's amazing. And if I could just say one more thing about that too, I think that is so vital. And I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I learned at my age a huge life lesson this year and last year, that you can actually have really, really crazy bad things happen in your life, and you can also be okay at the same time.
That's
You
right.
can actually find joy and peace and happiness even in the most challenging times. And I think it's about our lens. It's not about, I'm not into the kind of like pretending, like you're saying, paste a smile on your face, never looking at the painful things, because of course we need to be engaged with those things. But we don't actually have to be um, consumed by them. It is actually okay to feel good at the same time. And it's so possible. It's totally possible.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Morna, I'd love you to. I know that you've gone into depth in one of those things, and you've got the downloadable resource there as well. I'd love it if you could just skim through what are those other 4 steps in that the 5 questions that you've got.
Well, I've actually got a little visual.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and folks will see this or listen to this anyway in the download. But here are the 5 questions, and as I present them on the piece of paper, you'll see that I've got a circle there, and that's also about the psychology of creating a home for these questions within us as well. I think part of this process is actually creating a space inside of us for what we care about, and then expanding that space over time. So the first question we've already asked, which is what's important to you now and why. I hope these aren't reversed out on the screen. I have no idea. Okay, they're good.
They're beautiful.
The second question might be a little bit out there, but I want folks just to lean into this question, which is, what time is it in your world? It's a big one. What time is it in your world? Because there's a season for everything, and we need to be in tune with the time that we're in. The next question is, how do you want to show up? How do you want to show up? And the next one is super important. How do you want to feel? How do you want to feel? Because guess what? You have choices around this, and you can create more and more and more of the feelings that you want. And then the last one, which is kind of my favorite. Who are you becoming? Who are you becoming? And so I call these the 5 essential questions, because when you're in inquiry with these questions, because as I said probably earlier, there's no one-time answer of these questions. We're always in inquiry and changing and growing, and we're in relationship to these questions. So the beauty of these questions is, again, you can ask them once a week, once a year, but it's important to have a relationship to these questions. And then when we know these answers, when we're living into them, when we're focusing more of our life and practice around them, then again, we move away from this and we create more and more and more of what is true for us and what we want. And we can show up as a whole human being.
Well, that's wonderful. So I know that in that downloadable resource there, you'll have, the process, and you'll walk people through that process, and people will be able to pause that and to be able to start it again when they're ready for the next step, and so on. You've got a very simple process to work through. So thank you so much for that, Morna, and thank you for your talk today, and looking forward to seeing the results of the talk that you've given. And as more and more people find themselves and learn that they are enough, and that by tapping into who they are and the wonderful strengths that they have, whether they are young people, whether they are teachers, people in the world, we will be able to make a difference together. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you for the work that you're doing, for pulling together this incredible global community. I'm so inspired. I'm so excited, and I can't wait to connect with those of you who have watched this, and so curious about everyone's journeys and where this incredible movement that you're starting goes, Kathy. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Morna.